Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you love and felt a cold, empty distance staring back, even while they were holding your hand? If you are an empath, you know this exact chill. You felt that invisible, impenetrable brick wall that your partner throws up the moment things get too close, too real, or too intimate. We call them avoidants. They are the masters of the slow fade, the kings and queens of the emotional retreat. They pull you in, only to push you away the second a real, raw connection starts to form. And if you're like most empaths, you've spent months, maybe even years, battering your knuckles against that wall, desperate to find a single crack, a single sign that they feel what you feel. But what if I told you there is an invisible line, a psychological threshold so deeply guarded within the avoidant subconscious that they never cross it with anyone? They won't cross it for a casual partner. They won't cross it for someone they are just comfortable with. They won't cross it to keep the peace, to make you happy, or to pretend. They will only ever cross this line when they are experiencing a terrifying, ground-shaking, genuine love for you. When an avoidant crosses this line, their entire behavioral hardwiring changes. The hyper-independence they used as armor for decades starts to dissolve. But here is the catch. If you don't know what this line is, you will miss the sign completely. You'll keep chasing them, pushing them, and triggering their instinct to run, entirely unaware that they were actually standing at the edge of the cliff, waiting for you to notice they were ready to jump. Most people think avoidant love is silent, cold, or absent. It isn't. It's highly calculated, deeply defensive, and incredibly quiet. Today, we aren't just going to analyze attachment theory. We are going to peel back the layers of human behavior. We are going to look at the exact microsignals, the shifts in vocal tone, and the profound psychological surrender that occurs when an avoidant finally decides to lay down their weapons. If you want to stop guessing where you stand, if you want to stop feeling like an emotional beggar in your own relationship, and if you want to understand the exact moment an avoidance fear turns into absolute, undeniable devotion, you need to hear every single word of what comes next. Because once you see this line, you can never unsee it, and it will change the way you view connection forever. Let's cut through the noise and look at the raw mechanics of human interaction. When you study human behavior under a microscope, you quickly realize that we are all walking around wearing masks. But no one wears a more beautifully crafted, highly polished mask of self-sufficiency than the avoidant. They have engineered a lifestyle where they don't need anyone. They've convinced themselves that self-reliance is survival. But then they meet you, the empath. You don't just look at their mask, you see right through it. You feel the heavy, silent loneliness they've buried beneath their achievements, their quiet demeanor, and their polite distance. This immediately sets off an alarm inside their nervous system. To an avoidant, an empath is a psychological threat. You represent the one thing they've spent their entire lives running from: complete emotional exposure. Most empaths spend their relationships playing a highly exhausting game of hide and seek, trying to decode the avoidant's silence. You ask yourself, do they love me? Are they just incapable of feeling? Am I crazy for staying? Today we are going to end the guessing game. We are going to expose the one psychological boundary that an avoidant will protect with their lives, the line they will never cross unless they are genuinely, deeply in love with you. If you want to understand the true currency of an avoidant's heart, you have to stop listening to their words and start reading their behavioral baseline. If you stay with me until the very end of this breakdown, you will not only discover what this boundary is, but you will also learn the exact psychological trigger that inspires them to cross it, and how you, as an empath, hold the key to that transformation. To understand the line, we have to first understand the territory. An avoidance mind operates on a highly sophisticated threat detection system. From a young age, they learned a very dangerous lesson. People are unreliable. If I rely on someone, I will be abandoned. Therefore, safety equals distance. When they enter a relationship with an empath, a fascinating paradox occurs. The empath's natural warmth and ability to understand without judgment acts like a magnet. The avoidant is drawn in. They crave the safety you offer, but the moment they feel themselves leaning on you, their internal alarm system screams, "Danger, red alert." This is when the push-pull dynamic begins. They withdraw, they criticize, or they become cold. They are trying to restore their emotional equilibrium. They are putting their mask back on. But there is a limit to this game. There is a line where the performance ends and the truth begins. What is this line? The line avoidants never cross unless they really love you is the voluntary surrender of their escape hatches. Let me explain what an escape hatch is. An avoidant always keeps a back door open in every relationship. It might be a physical escape hatch, like keeping their own apartment long after they should have moved in with you. It might be a financial escape hatch, but most often it is a psychological escape hatch. They keep a small part of their inner world completely locked away. They have secrets, thoughts, fears, and vulnerabilities that they tell absolutely no one. Why? Because as long as they keep that back door open, they believe they can survive if you pack your bags and leave. They can look in the mirror and say, "See? I never fully let them in anyway. I'm fine." When an avoidant truly loves an empath, they do something that goes against every survival instinct they possess. They close the back door. They cross the line of absolute transparency. They voluntarily hand you the map to their deepest insecurities. They look at the person who has the power to destroy them emotionally, and instead of running, they say, "Here is exactly where I am weak. Here is what scares me. Please don't use it against me." This transformation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because of you. An avoidant cannot cross this line with another avoidant, nor can they cross it with someone who is constantly anxious, demanding, and critical. They can only cross it with an empath who has learned the power of secure presence. When you, as an empath, stop chasing them, stop demanding that they change, and instead create a calm, unshakable space of emotional safety, something shifts in their psychology. They realize that their walls aren't keeping you out. Their walls are keeping them locked in a cold, dark prison. Your empathy becomes the key. If you are with an avoidant, stop looking for grand, romantic gestures. Don't measure their love by how much they flatter you or how passionate they are in moments of excitement. Measure their love by their willingness to stand in the open, without armor, and let you see them. Crossing that line is the ultimate act of bravery for someone whose entire life has been defined by fear. It is their way of saying, "I am terrified of losing you, but I am more terrified of living a life where I never truly let you love me." If they have crossed that line with you, honor it. Don't rush them, don't crowd them, and don't take their vulnerability for granted. Because you aren't just holding their heart, you are holding the very key to their healing. To truly understand the avoidant attachment style, you must first understand the architectural blueprint of their psychological fortress. For an avoidant, hyper-independence is not just a personality trait or a preference. It is a highly sophisticated defense mechanism forged in the fires of early developmental neglect or inconsistent emotional availability. They have constructed an internal world where reliance on another human being is equated with absolute danger. In their mind, to need someone is to hand them a weapon that will inevitably be used against them. Therefore, they master the art of emotional climate control. They decide exactly how close you are allowed to get, when the conversation has become too intense, and when it is time to deploy a subtle distancing tactic to restore their sense of safety. They live in a perpetual state of red alert, keeping watch from the battlements of their fortress, ensuring that no one breaches the perimeter. The line they almost never cross with anyone, the line that remains heavily guarded under lock and key, is the act of voluntary, unfiltered emotional exposure. For an avoidant, letting down their guard is a terrifying prospect because it means willingly surrendering their escape hatches. Throughout their lives, they have survived by keeping one foot out the door, maintaining physical, financial, or psychological exits that allow them to whisper to themselves, "If this person leaves tomorrow, I will be perfectly fine." When they are with an empath, this dynamic becomes incredibly charged. The empath's natural ability to perceive the unspoken, to read the energy in the room, and to sense the unhealed wounds beneath the avoidant's cold exterior acts as a direct threat to this fortress. The empath has a way of bypassing the castle walls without even trying, looking straight at the fragile, wounded child hiding behind the heavy iron armor. This creates an intense internal friction for the avoidant. On one hand, they crave the deep, unconditional understanding that only an empath can provide. On the other hand, being seen so clearly terrifies them to their core. When an avoidant truly falls in love with an empath, a profound shift occurs in their psychological risk assessment. They make the conscious, incredibly difficult decision to dismantle their own defense systems. They stop using micro-distancing behaviors like taking hours to reply to a simple text, suddenly becoming busy when things get too intimate, or picking trivial fights after a weekend of deep connection just to manufacture space. Instead, they choose to stand in the open, completely exposed. They allow the empath to see their raw, unvarnished fear of abandonment and rejection. They admit, through their actions and their gradual vulnerability, that they are no longer in complete control of the emotional climate. This is not a comfortable process for them. It feels like stepping off a cliff without a parachute. By crossing this line, they are offering up their deepest vulnerabilities without any guarantee of safety, trading their cherished autonomy for a terrifying, beautiful, and authentic shared reality with the empath. To understand why the relationship between an avoidant and an empath is so volatile, yet so potentially transformative, you must look at the unique sensory equipment the empath possesses. Empaths do not just observe social cues, they possess a form of emotional X-ray vision that penetrates straight through the social masks we all wear to survive. When a standard partner interacts with an avoidant, they buy into the illusion. They see the calm exterior, the independent posture, and the polite emotional distance, and they assume that this person simply does not care or is naturally detached. But an empath operates on an entirely different frequency. They do not merely see the fortress walls that the avoidant has spent decades constructing. They immediately register the vibration of the wounded, terrified child hiding deep within the dungeon of that castle. They feel the heavy, silent loneliness that the avoidant tries to drown out with work, hobbies, or superficial independence. This diagnostic capability makes the empath the single most dangerous person in the room to an avoidant's carefully curated ego. To the avoidant's threat detection system, being exposed is synonymous with being destroyed. Their entire survival strategy is built on the premise that no one must ever find out how fragile they actually are. If someone discovers their weakness, that person can exploit it, control them, or inevitably abandon them when they are at their most vulnerable. Because the empath can read their microsignals, the subtle shift in eye contact when a topic becomes too intimate, the slight tension in the jaw, the sudden change in vocal tone, the avoidant feels psychologically naked in their presence. This exposure triggers an immediate and intense survival response. The avoidant's subconscious mind registers the empath not as a loving partner, but as an interrogator who is slowly dismantling their defense network. This is why avoidants often react with such hostility coldness, or sudden withdrawal when an empath gets too close. It is a desperate, frantic attempt to rebuild the wall before their core vulnerability is laid bare. They are trying to force the empath to look away, to retreat, so that the avoidant can put their mask back on and feel safe again. Yet in this exact danger lies the avoidant's ultimate salvation. The tragedy of the avoidant's life is that their fortress, which was built to keep pain out, also keeps love from getting in. They are trapped in a self-imposed prison of isolation, starving for the very connection they are hardwired to reject. A standard partner will eventually grow tired of the walls, accept the rejection, and walk away, reinforcing the avoidant's belief that people always leave. But the empath behaves differently. Because they can feel the pain behind the coldness, they do not just see an angry or indifferent partner. They see a nervous system stuck in a state of chronic fight or flight. They offer something the avoidant has never experienced, an unwavering, non-judgmental presence that refuses to negotiate with the mask. The empath offers a safe harbor where the avoidant does not have to perform, pretend, or protect themselves. It is a terrifying paradox for the avoidant. The very person who possesses the keys to their destruction is also the only person capable of saving them from their own isolation. When they realize that the empath has seen their absolute worst, their deepest shame, and their ugliest fears, and has chosen to stay without demanding a pound of flesh, the avoidant's entire neurological wiring begins to rewrite itself. For most people, the ultimate proof of love lies in the grand theatrical declarations, the whispered promises late at night, the romantic gestures, or the public displays of devotion. But if you analyze human behavior from a cold, clinical perspective, you quickly realize that words are the cheapest currency on the psychological market. Anyone can mimic the vocabulary of intimacy. For an avoidant, however, the metric of love is completely inverted. Their love is not measured by what they do, but by what they are willing to give up. And the single most precious commodity an avoidant possesses is their escape hatch. An escape hatch is a subconscious, highly structured contingency plan designed to ensure that if the relationship collapses, the avoidant will walk away completely unscathed. It is an emotional insurance policy. They maintain separate bank accounts, keep their physical spaces strictly compartmentalized, preserve social circles that their partner never meets, and hold on to a quiet internal narrative that says, "I can survive without this." They keep one foot hovering over the threshold, ready to bolt the moment the emotional temperature rises. This psychological survival strategy is not accidental. It is a calculated effort to manage their baseline anxiety. In any relationship, the avoidant is constantly conducting a silent, subconscious threat assessment. They look for signs of entrapment, demands for vulnerability, or indications that their partner is getting too close to their core wounds. The escape hatch is their safety valve. If the pressure becomes too intense, they can simply pull the lever, retreat into their hyper-independent shell, and pretend the connection never mattered. But when an avoidant truly falls in love with an empath, they are forced to confront the absolute futility of this strategy. They realize that you cannot fully experience intimacy while holding a map of the exits. The empath's deep, unrelenting authenticity makes the avoidant's internal hedging look like what it truly is, a coward's compromise. To cross the line and truly love an empath means the avoidant must engage in a terrifying act of psychological self-sabotage. They must systematically and voluntarily dismantle their own exit strategies. This is an agonizingly slow, deliberate process of surrender. It begins with the micro behaviors. They stop using conditional language when discussing the future. They stop keeping secrets about their daily lives or hiding their true thoughts to maintain a tactical advantage. They voluntarily merge their worlds, allowing the empath access to the private sanctuaries they once guarded with their lives. They stop preparing to run. For someone whose entire neurological wiring has equated running with survival, closing these back doors is the equivalent of a soldier throwing away their shield in the middle of a battlefield. It is an act of supreme vulnerability. They are giving the empath the ultimate power to hurt them, recognizing that the only way to truly touch the empath's soul is to stand before them completely exposed, with no exit plan, no backup strategy, and no way out. This is the silent, terrifying shift where the avoidant trades their safety for a chance at real connection, choosing the raw, unpredictable reality of love over the cold, predictable security of their isolation. Each closed door is a silent confession, a behavioral admission that they are fully invested, having finally decided that the risk of being broken by the empath is far better than the certainty of remaining whole but completely alone. To truly understand the internal shift of an avoidant, you have to look closely at the concept of performance versus presence. In the standard dating world, avoidants are often highly successful, charming, and highly functional partners initially. They know the script. They know how to buy flowers, how to say the right things, and how to execute the duties of a partner. This is what we call performing connection. It is an intellectualized version of intimacy where they use charm, superficial sharing, and structured activities to keep you happy while keeping their actual soul safely locked away behind a glass partition. They are giving you a highly curated, deeply controlled version of themselves. They show up, they play the part, and then they retreat back to their sanctuary to recharge. For an avoidant, this performance is a protective shield. It allows them to collect the benefits of companionship without paying the psychological tax of true, unfiltered intimacy. But an empath does not feed on performances. An empath can feel the hollow space behind the charming smile. They can sense the emotional wall even during a passionate embrace. When an avoidant truly falls in love with an empath, they realize that their script is completely useless. The empath's intuitive nature demands something they have never willingly given anyone: their actual, unvarnished presence. To transition from performance to presence means the avoidant must step out from behind the glass partition. They must stop managing the relationship like a business transaction or a social obligation and start actually inhabiting the shared moment. This means sitting in the quiet, unstructured spaces of a relationship without trying to distract, intellectualize, or run away. It means allowing themselves to be seen when they are tired, when they are uninspired, when they are anxious, and when they do not have a charming answer prepared. For the avoidant, this shift is agonizingly difficult because their entire life has been built on the belief that they are only safe when they are in control of their image. In the state of performance, they hold the power because they are directing the play. In the state of presence, they must surrender that control entirely. They have to allow the empath to look into their eyes and see the confusion, the self-doubt, and the messy, chaotic human beneath the polished exterior. They trade their carefully guarded autonomy for a shared, vulnerable reality. You will see this shift in the way they communicate. The conversations stop being about external topics, plans, or intellectual theories, and start being about the immediate emotional landscape between the two of you. They stop using their independence as a weapon to keep you at bay, and begin to see that true connection requires them to show up as a whole, unguarded person. By choosing presence over performance, the avoidant is committing the ultimate act of bravery. They are letting go of the steering wheel, trusting that even if they expose their raw, unpolished self, the empath will not use that vulnerability to destroy them, but will instead hold it with the reverence and gentleness they have spent their whole life searching for. When the avoidant finally crosses that deeply guarded psychological boundary, a quiet but monumental shift occurs within the relationship's matrix. This is the moment they sign an unspoken, subconscious contract with the empath, a contract that permanently alters the trajectory of both their lives. Up until this point, the avoidant has viewed the empath's emotional depth, intense intuition, and need for connection as a trap. In their mind, the empath's desire to go deeper was a threat to their autonomy, an emotional quicksand designed to swallow them whole. They spent their energy fighting against this depth, treating the empath's feelings as an unreasonable demand or an exhausting puzzle they had to solve or escape. But when true love takes hold, their perception of this emotional depth undergoes a radical transformation. The avoidant stops viewing the empath's sensitivity as a trap and starts viewing it as a mirror. This mirror is not always comfortable to look into. In fact, it is often terrifying. For the first time in their lives, the avoidant is forced to look past their own defense mechanisms and see the reality of their internal state. Through the empath's non-judgmental and loving reflection, they see how their silence has been a shield, how their hyper-independence has actually been a lonely prison, and how their fear of rejection has kept them from experiencing the very warmth they have starved for since childhood. This realization triggers a profound, permanent self-evolution. The avoidant begins to understand that healing cannot happen in isolation. They realize that the very walls they built to keep themselves safe are actually keeping them stunted. By accepting the empath as a mirror rather than an adversary, the avoidant begins the painful, beautiful process of psychological integration. They start to reconcile the split between their outer mask of complete self-sufficiency and their inner reality of human longing. This unspoken contract represents a total surrender of the power struggle that defines so many avoidant-empath dynamics. It is the moment they stop trying to change the rules of engagement and instead allow themselves to be changed by the connection itself. They begin to actively participate in their own emotional growth, not because they are being coerced or pressured, but because they genuinely want to be worthy of the safe harbor the empath has provided. They start to recognize that their vulnerability is not a weakness, but the ultimate expression of strength. In doing so, they don't just become a better partner, they become a more whole human being. The empath's unwavering, secure presence acts as the safe ground upon which the avoidant can finally do the heavy lifting of dismantling their oldest defense mechanisms. This evolution is not a temporary phase or a desperate attempt to keep the empath from leaving. It is a fundamental restructuring of their psychological architecture.